Yeah, so I've been working on this for quite a while, but I've hit a time in my life when the schedule doesn't really allow me to do much more editing on documents or videos or anything like that. So I just sort of run through them. So I'm going to go through a document here that I put up on Facebook back in February. It's gotten some pretty decent coverage, and I think it makes sense as to why we are in such a mess. And I'm not talking about C19, I'm talking about life in general. So this should potentially alarm you. Here's what I had back then. I called it forget about Arnold and the Terminators. It's the data people. And so, what happens when we get profiled every single day by every single application we use, every single website we visit, whether we stayed there for 3 seconds or 3 hours, every single charge on our credit card, every phone call we make or receive, every single text we receive or send, every email we allow to enter our inbox or sent folder, every like, love, smile, wow, sad or angry face response on Facebook or elsewhere, similar responses, every skip over, right? You're looking at something, you decide to just skip it over. Every pause to view, even if you don't click. All of your twits and twit views. The same with Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Lasso, Venmo. If you're sending money back and forth, all those things. Every YouTube view. Our pings on weather websites and apps for different locations. Every wireless network or cell tower that we ping, every last Bluetooth connection or browse, because Bluetooth also happens to do the same thing, it pings. Every RFID chip that is triggered as we walk past. Our GPS, Google Maps, Waze, Uber, Lyft, Pandora. Every app downloaded, such as that cell phone Bible app or that overhead flight identification software, which is cool, really cool. I think that's called Flight Radar 24, by the way. It's really kind of cool. Did you read the user agreements that often say that the app has access to your texts and messages, even the private group ones? And maybe most alarming of all of that, did you know that Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion collect and sell your financial data, including, check this out, your social security number? So they sell that to the highest bidder. If I did that, if you did that, we would go to jail. Then there are lesser known credit agencies that collect a range of data, including your rent payments or mortgage payments, your cell phone and utility bills, magazine subscriptions, gym membership information, and so much more. So this all adds up to a giant pile of accumulated habit data for you and me, for everyone. There are professionals out there that claim to have thousands and thousands of data points on just about every citizen of any developed nation. Think about that. Ask yourself this: what happens if all this data winds up being traded and sold on the open market? I got some bad news. The data market is larger than the global crude oil market. Now, that doesn't say much right now because that oil market is pretty small during C19, but it's bigger than the normal crude oil market when things are rocking and rolling, right? So your stuff has and will be sold daily, multiple times a day. Now, imagine the people who are buying this information, this data. It ranges from advertisers, which explains that weird ad that showed up right after you had a phone call with your grandmother about something. They didn't hear you necessarily, but they can predict how you and your grandma will act when you see an ad really well. They're very good at predicting the way we respond to things. How about politicians? Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Ted Cruz purchased and used that data to try and sometimes win elections. Politicians in Australia, India, Kenya, Malta, Mexico, and the United Kingdom, last time I checked, did as well, and others around the world I'm sure are. It is scary. An important lesson on why we need to think for ourselves at all times can be found in this. It's just insane the way they can point stuff at us. So especially myself as a Christ follower, we need to seek the Holy Spirit and the voice in our thoughts daily in our decisions. But let's move on to somewhere else. talk about that more in a different place if we'd like. Now, here is where the Terminators come into play. All right, Mr. Schwarzenegger, remember at the beginning? If advertisers and others are using this data to profile us and hand us only what we're more inclined to assimilate into our lives, then people will inevitably drift off in directions different from one another. So if you've been paying attention to society since the Obama presidency, you're aware that although we had a left and a right before then, things really started to amp up right after the data went into use in those years. Now, we've had pre-elections. Now that we've had, actually, the pre-elections is what I meant to say, and the final presidential election in 2016 when Donald Trump won, we see a massively divided nation. Even more than that, we see a massively divided world. There are two basic teams. There's a third independent, or I like to call it independently perturbed team, existing and developing more and more every day. So the Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and All Lives Matter movements use this data, as do the counteractive forces against these groups. The pro-Second Amendment and anti-gun crowds use this data. The socialists and conservatives use this data, which is not to be confused with the political party movements when it comes to immigration and taxation issues and so much more. The anti-faith and faith-filled movements both use this data. We are divided, massively so, and more violently so. So Jesus, a historical man who lived about 2,000 years ago, he was a real guy, by the way. So he was either a lunatic because he died for what he said he was, or he's the Lord. I happen to believe he's Lord. You can make your own decision. But he said something that's been recorded for history. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." He did not say the peacekeepers. He said the peacemakers. Now, let me be clear about this. What I'm about to say is not a rant against social media. After all, I'm sort of posting this on social media, right? I've got 30 plus pages on Facebook for various business and charity efforts. I use most of the social media programs mentioned earlier, but I can see clearly enough to positively identify those as the main source of this divide and discord. Other sources, like the news outlets, they call it news, but it's focused news or fake news, right? Regardless of whether you're on the right side or the left side or in the middle, it's crazy. All they do is put news out there as advertising to try to get more viewers because they're viewer supported. They sell advertising based on the number of viewers they have. So the news outlets that have massively shifted left and right, and the websites and blogs and the personalities that have all done the same thing, they're all causing this divide. So here in America, we have the 2020 American presidential elections coming. I predict a more divided nation, and I'm just curious, are you ready to be a peacemaker? It's can you actually go out there and bring peace to the world that you're living in, the people around you, your family, people at your business, people at your school maybe, people in your neighborhood? Can you be a peacemaker and not a divider? If you want to check out some background stuff on this, there's a film called The Great Hack. That's on, I think it's on Netflix. There's also a TED Talk by Carol, I think it's Cadwalladr, Cadwalladr. I think it's something about Facebook's role in all of this. And if you really want to get look at some scary stuff, it gets even worse than what I'm talking about now. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theory stuff. I'm talking about actual things that are in use right now in technology. You want to talk about conspiracy stuff and spiritual end of things, that's a totally different conversation. This is reality. There's an article out there on fastcompany.com. The title is, Silicon Valley is building a Chinese-style social credit system. Silicon Valley is building a Chinese-style social credit system. Check that out. As well as just think about what I'm talking about here. Can you be a peacemaker in the midst of this crazy, crazy time when they will only show you things that you seem to be interested in? Anything you're not interested in, they're not going to bother advertising to you about because they know you're not going to look at it. They're already figuring out your patterns and your habits. Can you, in the midst of that stuff, think for yourself and be a peacemaker? Can you follow the voice of the Holy Spirit, Christ followers? Is that possible for you? God bless. Have a great day.